word rejoicing that you may not even mention to a friend. Say, because you know soon the plant will unfurl banners of leaves and blooms, accompanied by triumphal chords, such as those heard at the beginning of Thus Spake Zarathustra, but played in this case on tiny instruments by the mouse orchestra. Or when you say hello on the phone, and the voice you hear is your cue to assume one of your many characters, not as a deception, nor will the voice you utter, your persona, be an obvious and comical imitation of one of the animals in a Walt Disney cartoon. Chippy Chipmunk comes to mind. No, you summon your dancing voice, the voice that dances with the voice on the other end of the phone. It is the voice that rises and falls in a range of pitches exactly calibrated to be heard by the voice listening on the other end, to be received into the ear, into the human instrument of the other, whether to say calibrated or geared, for example. This is called compassion. We know what Chippy Chipmunk would say in his high-pitched squeak. He would say, probably, "Eat your heart out. What are they gonna do? There's only so much to go around." Some end up caught between two mountains in a dilemma of subtle proportions: how to make a poem or a painting sing out, how to love amid stalks and crystals, how to ride the waves. Others languish on the beach in friendly groups, making small fires at twilight, waiting for Vesuvius to stop spewing black dust so they can return home. Beneath the sea, encrusted plates groan, preparing the implacable spectacle that will rearrange once more the geographical boundaries so meticulously observed by the adherents of written history. These fissures striate in wavy lines, moving to the left and now to the right, telling us, God help us, where the rules change, the costumes, the languages, the gods, the battles won. Therefore, for the sake of orientation, and in order to navigate through the water gone mad, I remind myself, you are not I. You end there, I here. The valley we share is deep and wide, and I will only ever speak your language with a heavy accent. Thank you.
Well, that was the longest and farthest journey, that's for sure. Listen, I want to give all the open readers a really big hand because you're really part of the community of writers that we've been gathering around the bookstore, and it was a great, great reading. And you've performed the wonderful function of getting the audience warmed up for our first feature reader, if he dares follow us all, Tom Sykes, who has always had a love for writing, but until a few years ago, he kept that passion in check in favor of earning a living for himself and his family as a construction contractor. But that's only his cover, believe me. Over the years, he's written newspaper articles, short stories, and poems periodically since the days long ago when he was the editor of his high school newspaper. More recently, since finishing his degree and graduating from Johnson State College in 2012, he's applied more time to writing projects than construction projects. I think his faithful wife can probably attest to that. He has owned and repaired an entire 59 cars since he was 15, and his daily practice of fix or repair daily or walk has led to many humorous happenings which have found their way into the writing. On February 29th, 2016, Leap Year Day, he made the giant leap into publishing with his first book, The Trip, A Modern Odyssey, which he is sharing with us tonight. So let's welcome Tom Sykes.
Thank you, Bea. Let's see if I can get this thing right here. Well, thank you for coming. It's quite an honor to have so many people here that would be sort of embarrassed to get up and leave, and I get to read to you. This is my book. There's a few copies here that I'd love it if you bought. It's kind of a fun book, I think. It has a prologue. Now, if you're like me, sometimes I don't read the prologue or the preface of a book. But in my case, this book, you have to start at the prologue because there's an epilogue too. So I will read the prologue and then jump around until B says sit down. So, prologue, the mechanic's report. My mechanic told me my car was practically shot. Not worth fixing, he said. Transmission's grinding and the motor runs hot. The muffler's too loud and the frame's all rusted. The springs are sprung and the radio is busted. And there's a leaking gasket somewhere that gives off an odor. It's probably from the oil that's dripping down on the motor. The clutch is slipping too and the oil pressure is low. So when the red light comes on, you better drive slow. And there's a crack in the windshield that distorted my view. And the brake pads are worn right down to their blue. And the front end, he says, it's the alignment. And it's causing the tires to wear out. They're likely to burst. And the right rear tire, he said, has a slow leak. And he also noticed the spare was flat when he took a peek. There's a funny noise in the back. Maybe it's a bearing or the differential's dry and the gears are wearing. Anyway, the seals are leaking oil too, but that's not causing the smell. That's coming from the leak in the gas tank, near as he could tell. The motor, he noted, is running rough and stalls when she starts. Probably needs new wires, spark plugs, and some other new parts. But before we start in, he said, there's more you should know. Now what, I thought. What else has to go? Well, there's a headlight out, he said. Maybe just a loose wire, or a bad bulb, or a fuse, but at least it hasn't caught fire. There's fleas in the back seat from your mangy old mutt. And maybe ticks too, he said as he slammed the door shut. There's a couple of springs here sticking up in your seat. And what I said when I sat down there, I best not repeat. He said he could tape them over so I wouldn't rip my jeans, but the tears in the headliner were way beyond his means. He figured the U-joints were loose and the brakes needed bled because the master cylinder was leaking too. Now, that's what he said. You can keep the reservoir full if you add fluid every day. But how long till it fails, he just couldn't say. He adjusted the door so I didn't have to slam it so much. But now the dome light comes on when I push in the clutch. The warranty expired a few years back, I explained with a grin. And the cost of repairs won't be too much to begin. He shook his head when I said these things would have to wait. At least, he said, change the filter and the fluids before it's too late. I nodded in agreement as I looked up to speak. I'm driving cross country tomorrow, Joe, but I'll bring it in next week. So it's that kind of optimism that our main character in the book has. And I'll skip on to the part of chapter 1 here. He's driving. Things went along uneventful after that. I should say he's starting from Memphis to go to Cape Cod. Went along uneventful after that, just real slow. I-40's kind of straight and boring. Not much to see, nowhere to go. Unless you're looking for junk shops. There's maybe 10 at every exit. I've stopped at plenty of them before, but I don't suggest it. By the time I got to Nashville, I was low on fuel and hungry too. After I got some gas, I drove downtown to see what was new. I always liked the honky-tonks, with the music rolling right out into the streets. I drove by Roberts. It was early. There still might be some seats. I needed a break from the boredom and something to eat, and real soon. There was a place to park in the shade, and by then it was late afternoon. The place was crowded, but I found a stool by the bar. I wanted to get something quick to take out that I could eat in the car. But the barmaid said, "No luck, honey. We only have beer on tap." So I ordered a tall, cold one with a 50 and a little tip of my cap. 5 guys and a girl on the stage were playing fiddles, guitar, and a bass, singing an old George Jones song, about lost love in a horse race. Then came a Hank Williams song about being lonely and blue. Then a song about 6 days on the road and how I'm missing you. The music was so good I ordered another beer when the first one got a little low. The band kept on playing those great old tunes, some fast and some slow. That steel guitar was whining. Those boys could play pretty good. I sat there some more till they finished Johnny Be Good. As I got up to leave, they started singing, "Please release me, let me go." Why, I could have sat there all night drinking. It was hard to say no. I had a long way to go yet, so I grabbed one more quick shot. And then I sat there spellbound. Man, that Orange Blossom special was hot. Then the lady sang Walking After Midnight, just like Patsy Cline at her best. I knew I had to leave then, or sit there all night and get depressed. I grabbed a half-pounder at the drive-thru before getting on the interstate, with large fries, a piece of pie, and a big vanilla milkshake. As I pulled out onto the highway, saying goodbye to that old town, I had to put the headlights on, because the sun had gone down. Those country tunes from the bar were still playing in my head. That's when I turned on the radio, before I remembered it was dead. Nothing came out of it but a buzz. It wouldn't even play a CD. It made me mad to think I hadn't had Joe fix it for me. I finished the burger in silence, and then the large fries and the pie. That's when something really bright in the rearview mirror caught my eye. Flashing blue lights, and the cop was flashing them at me. What did I do this time? I hadn't run a red light, and I certainly wasn't driving fast. I sucked on my shake like a Hoover, so he wouldn't smell the beer on my breath. As I rolled down the window, I felt real hot, like maybe I was sweating to death. License and registration. That was all he said in a slow southern drawl. I handed him over meekly, wondering what I'd done and all. I finished the shake kind of nervous while I watched him in the mirror. It took him a long time there writing. He was in no hurry, that was clear. He looked like a typical government worker, slowly earning his pay. But finally he got out of the car. I could see him waddling my way. He handed back my license. I stared at it. My eyes were kind of blurred. "Do you know why I stopped you, sir?" This is a trick question I've often heard. "You've got a headlight out," he announced finally. "The law says you need two." He handed some papers he was shuffling. One was pink and one was blue. Then in summation, he added, as he looked over the top of the car, "Boy, son, I hope you're not planning on going very far." I guess I shook him up a little when I said, "I'm heading to Cape Cod." He stepped back a bit, and then I heard him mumble softly, "Good God." He took another look at my inspection sticker just to be sure of the date. "Look," he said kind of seriously, "it's getting pretty late. You shouldn't be driving any longer with just one headlight. There's a motel up ahead. I think you ought to park it there for the night." Now, I didn't want to spend the money. I was planning to drive straight through. But I got the hint and didn't argue with the cops the way I used to do. "Is that an expensive place?" I asked. "That motel up ahead?" "Not too bad, sir," he grinned. "It'd be less than a ticket," he said. A little bit further on. I was having trouble seeing the highway. It might have been the beer or the one headlight, or looking through the cracked windshield. It was dark and a moonless night. But I was tired by then, too, and the whole sky had gotten dark. Maybe the cop was right, and it was a good time to park. Up ahead, I could make out some lights, and then a sign on a low hill. I remembered thinking, Bates Motel, Bastille, or something from Amityville. But it didn't look that bad. The sign said AC, adult movies, and cable TV. There were a couple of semis and a pickup truck parked out front under a tree. So I decided to make the best of it and pulled right on in. I parked the car by the office and put on my southern grin. The night clerk was Pakistani or Indian, hard to understand but very polite. I asked how he was doing and, "Have you got a cheap room for the night?" "Yes, sir," he said. "We have several nice rooms." He was trying to be a little shrewd. "How much is your cheapest one?" I asked, not trying to seem overly rude. "We have very nice room for $100, he said. "You like, very fine." That's when I noticed the cop had followed me and was parked out by the sign. He only stayed a minute after the clerk waved his hand. Then I paid the bill and got the key. Lucky room number 7 looked like a dump to me. But of course the single bed was bigger than the back seat of my car. But it was the smell of mold and mildew that really gave me a jar. Since the AC wasn't working, I opened the window to let in some air. Then I put my feet up on the table and tried to relax in the chair. The room, I noticed, was pretty tiny, only about 12 feet each way. But it was good enough, I told myself, at least for a one-night stay. Bed, bathroom, wooden chair, and a little table that held the TV. It wasn't home, but I could rest, at least to some degree. I washed my face in the tiny sink, but the water never got hot. I wasn't ready for a cold shower yet, so I flopped down on the cot. The remote didn't work at all, but the TV came on with just a touch. I searched for something to watch, but there wasn't very much. A lot of reruns, old movies, and some fat hillbillies cutting down trees. But that was better than all the channels in Spanish and Portuguese. Then there was the religious networks, everyone praying, then asking for cash. The weather called for a week of rain coast to coast, and then came the crash. The whole set went black. In a minute, a sign came on that read, "Pay clerk at office for more time." And that was all it said. I was mad as hell and went back to the office, and I yelled at the clerk, "Hey, buddy, what gives? How come that crummy TV doesn't work? You know your sign out there on the hill says you got cable TV." "Yes," he replied in his accent, "but it does not say free." "How much?" I asked. My blood pressure was really rising. $5, he announced, then added after slightly pausing, "but for $10 you get player and 3 special DVDs. He pointed to a shelf behind on the wall. It was sagging like a tired trapeze. I stepped a little closer to see what I could find, maybe a documentary or something silly so I could try to unwind. But there was nothing like that there, search as I might. Every movie was pornographic, and most were in black and white. And nearly all were foreign, too, with subtitles and on a narrow little screen. I glared at the clerk in growing disgust. It was all totally obscene. "Are these the only movies you've got? This stuff is just trash." "Yes, we have better in back, but for $20 more cash." He pointed to a curtain over a door in the corner of the room. I wasn't sold. "They're the same old porno crap, I presume." "Yes, only better." "You like, I make sure." "No thanks," I said as I walked out and slammed the door. The room was still musty when I got back inside. By now it had started raining too, so I had nowhere else to hide. I decided to make the best of the way things had been cast. I'd get a little sleep till morning. Surely the worst was past. When I flopped on the bed, the springs gave out a little squeak. And it was only a minute or two later when the roof started to leak. Just a drop or two on the pillow at first. I easily rolled out of the way. But the dripping kept getting stronger. Pretty soon it was almost a spray. The bed was soon soaked like a sponge, so I had to move to the chair. I also peeked out the window to see if the manager was still there. But the light in the office was out, and of course the phone didn't work. I sat in the dark fuming about strangling that clerk. But slowly I relaxed in the chair and my eyelids started to close down. But every time I was nearly asleep, I awoke to an unusual sound. It was a guy's voice, and then a girl's, in the room right there next to mine. And their bed springs were squeaking too, and they were a lot louder than mine. They were trying to be quiet, at least that's what I thought when I first awoke. But a few minutes later they talked more excited and louder, that is, whenever they spoke. I smiled to myself. At least there were some people still having fun. After the springs finally quieted down, I guessed that they were done. I was nearly back to sleep again when I heard the woman quite clearly say, "Okay, Frank, get up and put your clothes back on. Can't you see it's time for Ray?" Then the bed springs started cranking out again, that familiar old grating tune. It had rhythm and variation, but it ended real quickly when Ray cried out kind of loud, "Oh, June!" But June didn't say anything in reply, and things kind of quieted down. Then one of the guys yelled out, "Come on, let's pour another round." About that time, another pickup truck arrived at their door. 2 big guys got out. I thought they'd be cops for sure. But then I heard Frank say, "Hey, Ray, look, Bobby and Sammy are here." Then there was lots more laughing. Apparently they had brought more beer. It wasn't long after that the bed springs were squeaking again when another truck arrived and 2 more guys walked in. Then there was more drinking and laughing, and soon a poker game was going on, but the bed springs never stopped squeaking, at least not for very long. Also, between the noise next door and the water dripping on my head, it only made sense for me to go out and sleep in my car instead. Next morning, stop me when I'm over the time. 5 minutes. Okay. Next morning, I was hungry and stiff as a board as I slowly got out of my car. I felt a whole day had been wasted already. I surely hadn't gotten very far. I went back in the room to clean up and wash my face. I collected my things in my bag and headed out of that place. Just as I was closing the door, I heard a sad little cry. It was inside the room next to mine. It sounded more like a sob than a sigh. Then a meek voice called out, "Mister." It sounded more like a moan. I turned as my neighbor's door opened slightly with a slow creaking groan. A woman's face appeared at the door. It was open, but only a crack. We stared at each other a moment. I think we were both taken aback. Slowly the door opened a little wider. A tiny, sleepy face was all I could see. It was covered with blonde hair, all uncombed, frizzy, flying, and free. "Mister," she said. She was wrapped in a sheet. "Could you help me out, please? I just need a ride up the road. If you could." Then she started to sneeze. But she had my attention as she continued again, after slowly blowing her nose. "My boyfriend left me here last night, and I really hate to impose." I held up my hand in a motion for her to halt her sad and mournful refrain. Something inside me said, "Get out of here. There's nothing you can gain." But something else said, "Wait a minute, bud. This isn't so bad. Help the poor girl out. Things look pretty sad." After a moment of hesitation, she continued where she had quit. "I just need a short ride, mister, only up the road a bit." She looked so helpless and bewildered, clearly a damsel in distress. How could I leave her here all alone, stranded and in such a mess? "Okay," I said, "I've got some room. I'll have to clear off the front seat." "Oh, thank you, mister," she cried. She sounded so tender and sweet. "Hold on, I'll just be a minute, please. I've got to gather some things in my bag." But her minute turned into 10 or 15, and the time was starting to drag. But at last the door opened again, and she was standing there, in really tight jeans and an old T-shirt, but at least she had combed her hair. She actually looked pretty good there in the early morning light, considering, of course, how busy she had been all night. I pushed open the door for her, and she sat down right away. As I drove the car out of the lot, I was trying to think of something to say. But she spoke first, and I had to smile. It was just like in a cartoon. She stretched out her hand and proudly announced, "Hi, my name's June." Am I all done? A little more? All right, this is much later, 2-3 chapters later. Him and June are getting to know each other a little bit more. And
It's a longer ride than a short one.
this ride, yeah, this is not, it should have been a 2-day trip to Cape Cod. They're sleeping in some place in a roadside construction area for the night because they were driving off the road going to sleep at the wheel. And so they're just waking up, I think. He's just going to sleep. He's been thinking about what the hell did I get myself into. So much for my meandering speculations. They kept me awake till way past 3. Finally exhausted, I slept for a while. For an hour or two, I was free. Till trucks and workmen started showing up to tar and pave the road. We must have been a sight to see as we stumbled to their commode. A few miles further on, we ate at McDonald's and brushed our teeth. When we came out, I saw a wet spot under the car, so I took a look underneath. It looked like the leaking gas tank was dripping a little more than before. A support strap had rusted through, it seems. It was something I couldn't ignore. Fortunately, I had a ratchet strap handy. I always kept one in the trunk. I fastened a hook on the bolt by the drive shaft. I felt stupid lying in a parking lot like a drunk, but I hooked the other end of the frame and cranked it tight as hell. June said how clever I was, that I could fix everything so well. We felt a little better after eating and washing up. I put gas in the tank to make up for what we had burned, then checked the water and oil, and added more oil. That was starting to make me concerned. June was a little edgy. She thought some fleas had bitten her overnight. I remembered what Joe had said before I left, and I imagined she might be right. Of course, I didn't tell her. No need to make her sore. I was certain she hated fleas, but ticks I knew she hated more. She sat up and let the breeze blow in. The AC had quit 2 years ago. But the cool breeze brought the itching to a stop, so it seemed like we were good to go. We'd only gone a few miles up the road. I had just started to settle into the grind when June suddenly screamed so loud I thought she had lost her mind. She was thrashing around like a cat after a mouse. "Don, it's a tick. It's on my leg right here." I was afraid this would happen. I told her not to fear. "My mother got spotted fever from a tick. We have to get it out." I agreed, and we stopped at the very next exit at a drugstore thereabout. I went in and got some antiseptic cream, some alcohol swabs, and balls of cotton. We didn't want any spotted fever like her old mother had gotten. I got the tick out and crushed it in the parking lot, but June was worried there might be one more than one. She said they never travel alone. So we looked, and son of a gun, we found another one on her foot and a small one on her arm. I rubbed on the alcohol and the cream, but I couldn't stop June's growing alarm. We need to do a complete tick check. There might be more where we can't see. They crawl around everywhere, you know. It all sounded like a good idea to me. But June, I said, we're in a parking lot. We shouldn't do a tick check right here. There might be little kids around, or a cop might interfere. "Yeah, I guess you're right. Let's go somewhere that's more isolated." We turned down a little country road where the tick check could be facilitated. After a few miles, the road bordered on some woods. "Pull in there, Don. Go up that grassy trail." We went up the trail till the branches started hitting the car. By the time I stopped, June was turning pale. She jumped right out and was tossing clothing in the air. It was quiet and shady in the woods with a sweet pine scent everywhere. "Don, damn it, get over here. You've got to do a tick check on my back." She already had the Peterbilt over her head. I nearly blew my stack. She bought a Peterbilt t-shirt. It had Peterbilt right across the bosom. I slowly scanned every square inch of her spine, even rubbed a few spots where I wasn't sure. But she looked good, better than I imagined. So I asked if I should look for more. With that, she dropped everything to her ankles. It was quite a sight to see. I did a deluxe tick check like a country doctor, very slow and carefully. But unfortunately, no ticks were found where I had hoped they might appear. I couldn't help